Right now, across the nation, there is an affordable housing crisis. And this is something that Montanans are finding they are all too familiar with. Whether you're a student trying to find an affordable rental while you attend school, or you're a longtime Montanan trying to find a way to keep your home as property taxes rise. This crisis is also nothing new to the Montana legislature. They spent the last session voting on bills that directly impact how Montanans are able to find and keep affordable and equitable housing. I sat down with Representative Alice Buckley, where we talked about a constitutional initiative that Montanans will have the ability to vote on the 2022 ballot, CI 121.
CI 121 is a ballot initiative, a constitutional initiative, so it's going to be on your ballot in 2022 to cap property taxes at 1% of the value for all current homeowners. So for anyone who's buying or selling a house, your property taxes are going to go up. But for anyone who owns a home right now, it will cap your property taxes at a very specific rate and say it can't, every single year, the property taxes can't go up or can't go down more than 1% of that fixed value.
And what is some background information on this? Where did this come to be and why is it coming to be now?
It came to be because these two guys, it seems like they're using it for their political gain. It's modeled exactly off of this ballot initiative that ran in California in the 1970s called Prop 13, that for everyone is now this example of bad, inequitable, regressive tax policy. I mean, it's just so interesting because we've now had 50 years to look at the implications of Prop 13, and it's an example of what you don't want to do because, oh my goodness, we have so much work to do on affordable housing across the state. We have so much work to do on property tax relief, and also there are a bunch of really interesting, equitable, progressive ways of tackling it. But this ballot initiative it's not only not going to help it, because also people who are coming to us right now and saying my property taxes are too high, it's not going to shrink those. It's just going to say we're not going to raise them that much. But it's already a burden for people. So it's just this wild thing that is not going to help Montanans and is actually just going to cause all of these really adverse implications.
And who's at stake if this policy passes? Who are going to be the people who are most directly affected?
I mean, truly everyone in Montana, except for wealthy out-of-state homeowners who have a second home here that's really, really expensive. So if they already own a home in the Yellowstone Club and their property taxes get capped at 1%, that's amazing for them. But everyone else, it's going to gut the funding to our public system. So that is public schools, that's our firefighters, it's our police officers, that's MSU, that's our university system, that's libraries, it's all these things that our public dollars are going to, that our property tax dollars are going to. So anyone who relies on public dollars, but I think especially public education, that's one. Another one is that CI 121, this is really important, it only targets residential property taxes. So that means that anyone who has a commercial building, so small business owners or farmers and ranchers, anyone who pays property taxes, but it's not classified as residential, then what we do is the tax, we can think of it as a bit of a scale, like a teeter-totter. If residential property taxes get capped, then all of that burdens get shifted into all these other places in Montana. Probably it will be the straw that breaks the camel's back on a sales tax, which we've been fighting for a long time, but will probably be a trigger to a sales tax. So that's anyone who will be impacted by having a sales tax imposed on their food, their clothes, their diapers, their gas, whatever else it is. California, just like Montana, is in a housing crisis. And one of the things that this initiative does is it says, if you have a house, that's awesome, and you better keep your house, because then the property taxes are only gonna increase 1% of the home's value. But if you're trying to buy a house, or you want to sell a house to move into a smaller house, or you're just trying to get into the market, then that's when the property tax recalibrates and your property taxes jack up. So that's a little bit complicated, but that's all to say that homes that are a block across from each other that are exactly the same, have exactly the same taxable value, one of them on one side of the street, if it's been owned for 20 years by the same homeowners, might be taxed at a really low value. And the other one, if a young couple who's trying to get into the housing market buys it, the property taxes are going to be really high. So I think in terms of if we're thinking about housing, if we're thinking about trying to create equitable, affordable housing for everyone, you can look at California and say, whoa, it didn't help. It made everything worse, and it's likely going to do the same thing here. So we want to figure out how to get the families who are in Bozeman to be in the homes that are in Bozeman, and at the moment there's this huge mismatch. And then on the property tax side, there's some really interesting ones where we can make it so low-income Montanans or middle-class Montanans have what's called a circuit breaker. So depending upon your income, you pay a lower property tax if you're making less. It just makes so much sense. And it's like, okay, people who are making a shit ton of money, great, you can afford to be paying more in property taxes than someone who's living on Social Security. So some really interesting ways of doing it. Something called a homestead exemption, which would help get at the fact, they do this in Hawaii and it's really cool, to get at the fact, okay, if someone's a full-time resident in Bozeman, if you're a Montanan and you're living here, then you pay less in property taxes than someone who's in Texas but has a bunch of homes in Bozeman and just isn't living in them. So I think some really interesting things, and the dream is that this garbage and devastating constitutional initiative has opened up the door to start having really cool conversations about, okay, in a bipartisan, thoughtful, creative way, how do we start moving the needle on housing? Because we're all dealing with it.
While CI 121 will make sure that there's no huge rise in property taxes, which is great for current homeowners, it shifts an extra burden of taxes onto young people and any future homebuyers in Montana. CI 121 is another policy that is benefiting the rich and out-of-staters, but leaving the community and future generations of Montana behind. The policies that Alice Buckley presented, such as a circuit breaker and a homestead exemption, are policies that I agree with. Policies such as these are going to be what benefits Montana new and generational. After learning about the negative effects that Prop 13 had on California and how these could possibly affect Montana and our community, I'll be voting no on CI 121.